Winchester. My name is Dot Butler. I'm the program manager of the Winchester Coalition for the Safe Community. We're partnering this evening with Parent to Parent, and we're just really pleased that you're here. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to the Griffin Museum for allowing us to use this space, a neutral space where we all can all come together and learn. And we don't want to have school against school or anything like that. The purpose of this is just to share information. And right now I want to introduce the people that had this idea from the get-go. They wanted to bring this initiative to all of you, and that is Katie O'Connor. Oh, by the way, these are Dot's pretzels. Have you ever had them? I don't want to take them home. So please enjoy the refreshments.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Erica Walsh.
And I'm Katie O'Connor. I have 3 sons at Vincent Owen and 1 daughter at Neighborhood Co-op.
And I have 2 daughters at Vincent Owen and 1 Neighborhood Co-op. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Allison Baker here tonight in Winchester to discuss this important and hopefully ultimately hopeful topic for our community. Before we begin, we'd like to extend a special thank you to Dodd and the Winchester Coalition for a Safer Community, and Jess and Lindsay with Parent and your whole group for sponsoring this event and making tonight possible. Our journey to bring Dr. Baker here started last May when we read her interview in the Boston Globe. Her message immediately resonated with us, and soon after we had the opportunity to hear her speak in Arlington. Leaving the presentation, we knew we really wanted to bring her to Winchester, so we're so happy to have her here tonight.
Here's just a little bit about Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker is a double board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist with decades of experience treating psychiatric disorders from childhood through adulthood. She specializes in pediatric anxiety and adolescent mood disorders and is on the faculty at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Dr. Baker has presented in communities across the Boston area, from Newton to Wellesley to Arlington, as well as in New York, Miami, and the San Francisco Bay Area. In addition to her professional expertise, Dr. Baker is also a mom of 3 children in nearby Wellesley, giving her a personal perspective that many of us can relate to. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Allison Baker.
Well, thank you so much for that really warm, welcome, and formal introduction. As I was introduced, my name is Allie Baker. Please call me Allie. And I really wanted to say thank you for being here live in the flesh tonight. I think it's a testament to how much you all care about your children and the future. And I think in a world that can feel overwhelming, especially as parents, it is really easy to feel concerned about the state of things, from technology's impact to social pressures to the sheer pace of change. And what remains timeless is the importance of community. So this is really impressive to me that you are all out tonight on a school night, shoulder to shoulder. Other really important timeless things to maintain are real world experiences and investing in the health and well-being of our children. And the talk is entitled, Are the Kids All Right? I want to sort of add postscript, how are we doing as the parents? But I will cover a broad range of topics, some science, some more sort of anecdotal information, and really wanted to just get the following out, that our kids, I think you all know, need a lot more than just information and screens. And they really need connection. They need connection to us, they need connection to one another, and they need connection in their communities. They need a lot of time to explore and to play, to learn how to navigate challenges face to face. And they need us as their guides to really be present with them, reminding them that there's a bigger world out there full of relationships and creativity and meaning. So tonight we will talk about how we as parents and caregivers can nurture those real-world experiences and foster community as you are doing so beautifully tonight, and also support the holistic health of our kids, especially in times like today when it can feel like the outside world is challenging a lot of what we stand for. And so I really thank you for joining me in this important conversation. So let's focus on how we can make a difference together. So just a little bit about me, but you heard my introduction. So I am a child and adolescent as well as a perinatal psychiatrist, and I serve on the faculty at MGH and teach at the medical school there, and I also have a private practice. I did all my training in New York City and moved to the Massachusetts area about 8 years ago. I'm also a medical advisor on the board for a grassroots organization called Wait Until 8th. Many of you, probably most of you, have heard of it, and this is a voluntary position that really was thrilling to me to be able to participate in the leadership level, because it's something that I had signed my children up for back in 2018 when I didn't want my then, I guess, 4th grader to get a fully loaded smartphone like many of her peers were getting. I'm also a physician, so I've been spending my career taking care of children, the adolescents, mothers, and families, and I really have come to recognize the impact of technology on mental health as a pressing public health issue. So I really am investing a lot of time in these kinds of experiences, educating communities, and taking a proactive approach to what I call primordial. It's not my terminology, but in medicine we talk about primary prevention, but even before that, primordial prevention, addressing risk before they fully manifest by equipping families with the knowledge and tools to set healthy boundaries around technology use. And this investment really aligns with my broader mission of supporting long-term mental wellness and health, not just through direct patient care, but by shaping environments that foster resilience and healthy development from the earliest stages of life. So I hope that by tonight's end, you can take these 3 takeaways. Our kids need more free time, more free play, independence, and sleep. Modern parenting is extremely hard and stressful. It is made easier when we do it as communities. And another really important point is that when we are doing well, when we have optimal mental wellness and well-being, our children are mentally healthier, and that's often without them ever having to see a psychiatrist themselves or a therapist. So I did put together some learning objectives just because this is what I do when I teach at the medical school, but why community connection actually matters, what does the most up-to-date science tell us about how the kids are doing, how did we get here, and most importantly, what can I do and how can we proceed from here? So why community connection actually matters. People have asked why I started to talk about pediatric mental health with a slide about social connection, and the two are closely related. Again, the fact that you're all out here tonight on a school night shows your investment in your community, and it will pay dividends. Your health will benefit because we really need to work at strengthening the fabric of our community, and social connection, the structure, the function, and the quality of our relationships with one another is a critical and underappreciated contributor to both individual and population health, community safety, resilience, and prosperity. So much so that our nation's top doctor, our Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, who also did his training here in Boston at the Brigham, has made this one of his top agenda items in terms of medical issues to focus on. He could have chosen cardiovascular disease, cancer. He chose the mental health and well-being of our youth. He chose all of us in terms of the stress of parents in modern times, and also identified an epidemic of social isolation and loneliness. So this is his focus, and I think it really speaks to the need. The reason social isolation actually matters is because it poses a significant risk for individual health and longevity, and can actually increase the risk for premature death as much as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. What drives these profound health and well-being outcomes? It's because we need each other. Social connection is a fundamental human need. It's as essential to our survival as food and water and shelter. And throughout history, our ability to rely on one another has been crucial to our survival. So in modern times, we are biologically wired to want this, to seek this out, and our brains have adapted to expect proximity to one another, especially as we are tonight, shoulder to shoulder. So when you pair that need for social connection with modern life, you never really have to interact with anyone outside of your immediate family. And you can see and appreciate how loneliness has been on the rise as social connection trends decrease. And all of this was actually before March 2020, which was essentially, we were already kind of perilously going along, and then took that bad situation and we ended up in a ditch. So in terms of its relevance to the mental health and well-being of our kids, it sets the stage for this pediatric mental health crisis, that older adolescents and certainly parents were less socially connected in the real world, which frustrates their biological need to connect in person. And this is the same model for what is happening to kids, with their brains being wired up in the presence of other kids and adults through their face-to-face, shoulder-to-shoulder embodied social connections and interactions has dramatically fallen off as a lot of these essential experiences for healthy development have been crowded out with smartphones and smart devices and social technologies. So what does the evidence, the most up-to-date science, tell us about how the kids are doing? And a lot of the following slides, I'm going to click through them fairly quickly to tell a story. So, and I'm happy to make all this available to you in a PDF if you want to, get really into the odds ratio and relative risk and all that good stuff. But I wanted to tell a bigger picture and a broader story. And actually, I'm going to pause because, believe it or not, my Mac is about to run out of battery, which is hilarious and ironic, but thankfully I have my charger. I did come from clinic today, so I'm a lady on the move. Okay. So what does the science say? So locally here in the Boston area, distress is on the rise. So this was from the Boston Public Health Commission's Health of Boston 2024 report with the mental health section. And this is one of a series of reports providing topic-specific surveillance data on the health of our communities. And so it shows the concerning trend of increasing distress among our high school students in the Boston public schools. This is mirrored in national data as well. And so this is from Gartner Research looking at indicators of poor mental health. This particular graphic representation is among US girls and young women, but I think really illustrates the trend of essentially poor mental health as measured by various mental health outcomes that we track. So for example, depressive symptoms, a full major depressive episode, and also self-harm and or suicide. And you can see that though certainly not flat, the data is mostly trending in a certain ballpark until a point in time when rates have really skyrocketed. That does also align with when the iPhone grew sort of to be, an extension of our human bodies. So how did we get here? So in 2010, as I alluded to, there was this sharp rise in pediatric mental health outcomes that was very puzzling for our community of professionals. So I graduated from residency in 2010 and did my fellowship between 2010 and 2012. So I really had a front row seat to this evolving story that was very puzzling to our professional community in terms of what were the variables driving these outcomes. Was it the climate? Was it the sort of financial instability of 2007, 2008? Was it sort of political polarization? What about school shootings? There were all kinds of hypotheses about what could be driving these outcomes. But then the data got more complex in terms of what we were seeing specifically in psychiatry. It's not all areas of mental health. So if it were all of the above and a general stressor, raising cortisol, which we think sort of it can be problematic and roughen any vulnerability to psychiatric illness, one would suspect that all psychiatric disorders would be more at risk, at least, for an increase in incidence. But specifically, it was anxiety and depression, with the rest, although ADHD is its own sort of special consideration with respect to the topic of tonight, but the rest were mostly metastable. Furthermore, young people were particularly at risk. So compared to other cohorts, the rates of prevalence were much higher in 18 to 25, and in fact, even higher for 14 to 18 and also 10 to 14. Many people, as this debate has been sort of rolled out, have said, and have made the fair point that isn't this about increased self-reporting? We're now doing so much more screening. We're asking people a lot about feeling sad or having had these thoughts, or sort of presenting these ideas and putting notions in people's heads, and they're more likely to respond. But the U.S. Emergency Department visits for self-harm it's not just self-reporting, it's also behavioral, and a behavioral increase. And also, if it were self-reporting and perhaps accompanied by a behavior like self-harm, we don't have the capacity in the hospitals to admit everybody. And so the fact that young people are being hospitalized more than ever means there's a threshold for concern and risk that is really significant. And then many would say, this country, we love it so, it's also complicated and fraught, and is this an American problem, uniquely American? But actually all across the developed world, there are similar trends seen in the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and Ontario, Canada. In addition to this data, there is also, but in fact beforehand, the decline of what's been called by Jonathan Haidt and others, people who've been describing this before he published that book, The Anxious Generation, wherein there's an uptick in the amount of supervision we're giving our kids and a downtrend in how much free play and independence they are getting. So if you look at both, this is in the United Kingdom here on the left, a huge drop-off in outdoor play and socializing outside of the home, with a big increase in screen-based activities, not all of which are necessarily gaming, but enrichment, as well as organized sports versus sort of free play, and time spent doing homework. While also parents are spending more time parenting, which didn't used to be a verb, but that parents were working, doing a full-time working day, and then also shoehorning in that many hours in the cracks of the day in terms of the parenting, whether that's driving to and from the activities, setting up the play dates, signing up for the enrichment classes. As a result, the kids start spending less time with one another. So this shows a real decline in the trend of meeting up with friends every day. And as I said in my introduction, we need that. We need to be with each other, and the kids need to be roaming and exploring and just hanging out. Nothing productive, no outcomes that they're driving towards, just being kids together, and they're not doing that. And this is such a sad graph of daily time with friends just drops off. So what replaces that is the phone-based childhood, or the idea that there are only so many hours in the waking day, and so if you're spending that many, either in these organized sports or doing homework or engaging with screens or socializing online. There's just no time to see your friends in real life. And as a result, a play-based childhood gets crowded out. So this is a graph showing daily social media users among all US adolescents and the percent of high schoolers who say that they use social media nearly every day. So I've referenced this idea of the phone as an experience blocker. It's not my original idea, but it is, I think it's very apt, because I think people can get bogged down in the science about correlation versus causation, and there are lots of very spicy debates in the academic world about is social media the cause of the mental health crisis? It is not a singular cause. These are complicated issues, but I think a simple explanation and way to frame it, and also I'm giving you a little bit of the punchline, this is also the solution. The phone is something that gets in the way of all the different kind of essential ingredients for healthy development. In terms of what we're doing at the level as an individual, within our family systems, our communities, our environment, and in terms of society. The things that our kids need, and frankly we need, every single day. Time outside, moving our bodies, nourishing our bodies mostly well if we can, sleep, and lots of it, meaning and purpose. And that often is work for us and school for our kids. So when you introduce something that is so alluring and so impossible to resist, the rest of those pieces get crowded out, both by a function of all the busyness that we're up to, but also because this is a much more reinforcing device experience for a lot of kids, and frankly for us. So in sum, by 2015, 1 in 5 American teen girls are using social media as a full-time job. By 2023, more than 46% of teens report being online, quote, almost all of the time. And our kids are not seeing one another enough. They're certainly not sleeping enough, and we'll review that data. They can't concentrate, and their brains are being wired to prefer screens. So this was in the Surgeon General's advisory. The CDC also does a survey. It's a cross-sectional survey every 2 years where they ask all US high school students a bunch of different questions about how they're doing. And so for the first time, and it was released under a month ago, this year's survey asked a specific item with respect to how much time kids are spending online. And so nearly 30% of teens reported using social media more than once an hour, with 77% of teens reporting frequent social media use. So I find this data compelling. I think it really lends itself to deepening the conversation about how social technologies are influencing our youth's mental health, and underscores, I think, the need for proactive strategies like boundary setting around social media use, promoting these real-world interactions, and addressing mental health challenges exacerbated by digital environments, specifically cyberbullying. And so this youth risk behavior surveillance tool serves as something that public health professionals, educators, and parents can use to help inform your decision-making about what you want to do to take the very best care you can of your kids. How do smartphones get in the way of healthy development? So one concept that I have struggled communicating effectively around is why online social connection is not as sufficient replacement for in-person social connection. And my adolescent patients are certainly right when they say that social media and multiplayer video games connect them with more friends than ever. But that connection does not seem to be as good as what it is replacing. So I think it's important to remember that human childhood and human development is very unique in terms of our huge requirement of cultural learning. And the experiences that we go through in our early years set up our wiring and our blueprint. And we have this massive human brain that is frankly an evolutionary novelty with like genes getting it started, and then we have these expectant development. We need and expect a lot of back and forth reciprocal serve and receive, eye contact based experiences which develop our social centers. So in the early years especially, the things that you are doing for hours and hours really do change the course of development. And so this is a study. I don't want to scare people either. Whatever you've done and whatever is happening at home and in my house too, nothing is that delicate. I just want this to be hopefully a motivating talk to really reflect on your own technology use and the way in which you're using it with your children. So this is a report that came out by John Hutton and colleagues looking at a young population. So these were kids, I think 4 to 8, and looking at a measure of screen time, wherein you could see that a higher, what's called like a screen Q score, meant that there were lower microstructural sort of integrity measures of their major white matter tracts in their brain. And so that's in areas that are responsible for some pretty key skills like visual processing, empathy, attention, complex memory, and early reading skills. This is a study that he had done prior with another colleague looking at an older group of kids, so I wanted to include it just to sort of round out the developmental arc between 4 and 12, that brain connectivity in kids is increased by the time they spend reading books and decreased by the length of exposure to screen-based media. So the answer is not no screen-based media ever, but let's be really thoughtful and intentional about how we use it and when and why. The other ways in which smartphones really get in the way are the opportunity cost in terms of sleep loss. And so we know that our kids are not getting enough sleep and that has dramatically increased since the advent of the smartphone. We know that these devices are incredibly fracturing of our attention. When my kids, I take their devices and plug them in while they're doing homework, and I'm trying to get my work done, and the notifications are just endless and unrelenting, and it's a marvel that kids can get anything done. But they sort of adapt or learn to just tolerate that, which is clearly also sort of bringing them off their task. Not everyone who uses social technologies and devices will become highly reinforced to the point where they cannot stop, but there are those who can. The genetics and sort of science behind that is complex, but I think it needs to be part of the conversation. That I think if you sort of reflect on your own behavior of always sort of checking, like where is the phone, or if there's a buzz in your purse or your backpack or at your desk, it's impossible to ignore, and it will really bring your attention off task. And some people have a very difficult time, many of us have a very difficult time regulating our use of these devices as adults with fully myelinated white matter tracts and frontal lobes. Apropos this notion of addiction, we often hear discussion of this, and as I mentioned, researchers disagree about how excessive screen use should be classified, so they prefer this term that's called problematic media use. And so a few years ago, there was a parent-reported measure of problematic media use, and more recently, actually, I think this was out last month, this study looked at problematic media use among kids from about 2.5 to 5.5. And they found that kids who were emotionally reactive, aggressive, and watched more TV overall showed more problematic media use. And more problematic media use also predicted later emotional and social problems. The study made the point that parental strategies of restricting screen time rules and general warmth made no difference in the trajectory of problematic use. But I think what's important to remember there is that for a lot of that population, by the time parents were intervening through the coaching program, sort of the horse had left the barn. So I want to shift to what can I do if these are sort of scientific headlines and papers that are concerning to you. I really want to bring the spirit of the room up because there's plenty for us to do. So one is that we can work as communities, and we are all in this together. Wait Until 8th is a grassroots, parent-led, volunteer movement that gets families to come together and collectively set the goal not to give your child a smartphone until at least the end of 8th grade, as long as at least 10 other families total from your child's grade and school pledge. And so I want to say a few things about this. First is that I was a pledgee before I became a board member. This is a volunteer position, so I just want to put all my cards on the table. I have found it to be so helpful to get interest and motivation in our school community, and I championed the pledge back in 2018 as an N of 1. And now we have active pledges at every grade in our children's elementary school and also in the 6th grade at our local middle school. And the reason it works is because we struggle, many parents don't want to hand over the iPhone 16. And at the same time, when your oldest comes home and says, like, this is just what we do, this is just the cultural norm, I think we also don't want our kids to be socially isolated. And so we're struggling with this sort of binary choice, but I'm trying to make the case that there are so many other options. If you are thinking about a device for your child for communication, for sports, or there's a glitch in the matrix and you have to let them know about a change in the pickup plan, you can get a basic phone. You can get all kinds of phone alternatives that play music, that can talk and text, that you can see where they are if they're starting to walk more independently, but you also want to know that they made it to their destination. All of these technologies exist, and that is not considered a smartphone with an internet browser and all the apps available, including social media. Another action item that is really doable and within reach is going phone-free in your schools, bell to bell. There is a phone-free schools movement, again, a nonprofit, and there are many states, actually, that have mandated a phone-free school day bell to bell. That's not the case here in Massachusetts, and it's sort of all over the map in terms of what's happening at different schools across the country. I will say the anecdotal evidence, and there's no sort of longitudinal papers yet, but the reports are just glowing. It is not hard. I think people get really bent out of shape thinking, like, logistically, how are we going to do this? Or, you know, what if? Or the parents are going to push back about safety. Or these children need to learn how to be good digital citizens. And I just want to share that there are many schools and many cities and whole states where they've implemented a phone-free school day, bell to bell, with a lot of success in terms of, I think, outcomes that really would matter to all of you. So one, and again, I do not get any kickbacks from Yonder. They are just like a plug-and-play resource that I'm trying to get Wellesley Public Schools to consider. The pouch itself costs $30 per child, and the pouch can last, I think, 2 to 3 years. And the idea is that the kid gets to school, they can bring their device with them, their watch, all of their sort of smart technologies. It goes in the pouch locks at the beginning of the school day, and then they go about their business of being a kid. And they're not being pinged or worrying about who said what on which social media platform. They're not going to the bathroom to sort of sneak a peek at their feeds. They're just at school, and they're learning. And that's what we all got to do. And it would be such a gift, I think, such an opportunity for our kids to be able to give that to them. So this is just one anecdote. After the first week of Yonder implementation, I just love this one. We've had more books checked out in 1 week than all of last year combined. It's just like, and the list goes on. People talk about the volume in the cafeteria. The kids are getting to class early, and they sit there and they like chat with their teacher. Or maybe they're a little bit socially more introverted and inhibited, and so they've never had to actually develop that skill that we all need to develop, which is like that awkward moment of making eye contact and then sort of bridging the gap. And kids are primed to be able to learn these things at this stage of the game. And that's been taken away from them. And I think that's a huge contributor to a lot of social isolation, a lot of lack of skillfulness in sort of interpersonal domains for a lot of our youth. Phone-free schools improve learning and test scores. So there are data. A lot of it is from Europe, where of course they're like way ahead of us. Many of European countries, Scandinavian countries, have been phone-free bell-to-bell. In the UK, and no big surprise, test scores improve. Kids can focus. Kids feel better, more present. But there's real science to back it up if people are concerned about the legitimacy of something like this, or a big overhaul, or an expense or investment. I appreciated that in the Journal of the American Medical Academy of Pediatrics talked about how schools have a unique opportunity to create a predictable screen-free time for kids when so much of the rest of their life may not be the case, whether that's in transportation to and from sports or clubs, or at other friends' houses, or even in their own home. At school, just like universal physical activity and nutrition for all, we could really think about supporting recommendations on screen time and media use as a public health issue, just like nourishing our kids and giving them the physical exercise and fresh air that they need. On the home front, there are a lot of tools that you can implement to walk back your screen situation at home. There are parental controls, there are entire home network options. HealthyChildren.org has a sort of step-by-step family media plan, and I'll include a lot of resources at the end of the talk as well for you to look over. We have to model better behavior, and I'm fully guilty of that myself. This has been sort of a long, interesting process of self-reflection, and frankly, becoming consciously aware of something that I was really not consciously aware of. The moments where you're just looking and you miss something with your kid. And we've all done it, and they're all going to be okay. And it sort of like breaks my heart. And so it has helped me think about using my phone as a tool. Like, I need to check work email and text at this time, and then I'm going to put it away and do my work, and then I'm going to check back in at lunchtime and try to just change our own behavior, which I think models really healthy things for our kids. If you love the idea of increasing free play, but also there are no other free-range kids for your free-range kids to free-range with, you can form a Let Grow Play Club where you can just say, like, we're hanging out at this park, and you have these wonderful parent organizations, parent to parent, and you can just declare it so that the kids are going to all get together and like let them just wild out, and maybe there's one sort of parent low-key monitoring for big picture safety, but let them do their thing. And it's such a gift to one another, because then you can drop off, and it's not like an expensive camp or something that you didn't make the sign up for. It's just hanging out. We can learn skills to respond more effectively to our kids' anxiety. That's often a big barrier to this rolling out successfully for a lot of families, and I acknowledge that and validate that. If it is really anxiety-producing to you to imagine your child wandering and hanging out and not necessarily being at home, where everything's sort of under control, there are many solutions and tools that you can use to take care of your own anxiety. And so this is a parent-based treatment called SPACE, where it's as efficacious as taking your kids to a cognitive behavioral therapist for their anxiety. If you learn different skills as a parent to start reducing your accommodation of their avoidance and their anxiety rates go down. I think your sort of empowerment as a parent and your health improves. So this was a study that came out, ironically, in March 2020, which was so interesting, when a lot of child psychiatrists, I think, were thinking, like, how are we going to see our patients? And then ultimately, it really lent itself well to parent coaching in a virtual fashion. We need to take better care of ourselves. We need to judge ourselves and others less negatively. So all of those essential experiences that I highlighted for our kids, like sleep, exercise, eat mostly clean, but also it's okay to eat other things. Have meaning and purpose. Just spend time in nature and limit your own tech use. That will let us feel better, decrease our stress, and let us do a better, more effective job with our kids. And again, take care of each other. We can form playborhoods, biker gangs, and reduce the individual parent or caregiver burden, and take care of the community as you all are doing tonight. I wanted to highlight your wealth of local resources here in Winchester. I was really actually amazed. So put those up there for completion's sake, and I'll circulate the deck. There are also other resources for mental health and managing tech through the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the AAP, NAMI, the Judd Foundation, Child Mind Institute, as well as Common Sense Media, Protect Young Eyes, our Surgeon General's advisories, and the Interactive Media and Internet Disorder Clinic at Children's. And so that's basically the end of my talk. I wanted to end with some inspiration, and bear with me, it's a video, but I wanted to project it because I think it is really inspiring. It's about something called Phone Free Friday Summer Challenge. I think it brings the issue to life. So it's 2 minutes, and then we'll be done, and I'll take lots and lots of questions. But I wanted to end here. Hopefully audio is good. Oh, I didn't even think of the audio, but.
Of a time when you were with friends and nobody was on their phone.
I don't think I have one.
The average screen time for younger people is like 8 hours a day. It's absurd, and I'm embarrassed to admit, but I have had days where I've probably spent at least that. And I understand how addictive it is and how it affected me.
If I didn't have phone until like now, I feel like I'd be actually better off, you know. I like know what to just man because I used to watch TikTok like crazy. I don't know why.
Or I'll be doing something else and like feel the need to either go on my phone or even be doing one thing on my phone and feel the need to do something else.
I've babysat kids who were like 6 years old who could.
Oh no. Well, all right, well, you get the gist of it, but I'll share it with you because it's really worth watching, like hearing from our best and brightest, our kids, and how they reflect on their experience, and I think you will not ever regret delaying. It's hard in the moment because I think the ask is so strong, but hearing from the kids saying that like they wish that someone else had sort of stepped in and said, it doesn't have to be this way, we could do it differently. So it's very inspiring, and I really thank you all for your attention tonight. And I'm happy to take questions. Also, feel free to stretch your legs if you need to. Yes?
Can you talk about the trade-off or the balance of putting off the smartphone until 9th grade versus being left out socially? So if their group of friends all have a smartphone, they're not involved in the day-to-day interactions, how do you balance that with potential benefits of putting them off?
Yeah, so that's like the question, and I think it's really challenging. I signed up for Wait Until 8th because I didn't want this for my child, and at the same time, she really was like one of the very last kids in her friend group to get a smartphone. I think that's why collective action helps in a community. If there are 9 other families in your child's grade that aren't getting a smartphone until the end of 8th grade, then those are 9 other friends. And your child might say, well, those are like not my people. These are my friends. But I also think you could change the norm as like the parents of the friend group and say they can get a device for for example, texting, but it does not have to be a fully loaded like smartphone with an internet browser and apps. And so if you think about the functionality that's so helpful for communicating and social connection, is texting, and even like taking pictures and sharing pictures with one another. Music, which is a wonderful resource to kids for emotion regulation and coping, and also just like, I couldn't advocate for it more. But so I think that if you can come together with your group of parents or your community or within your schools, you can start to change the game. I want to acknowledge that it's hard. I have a 6th and 8th grader. It's a lot harder than for my 1st grader. My 1st grader, everyone's like, yes, obviously we are not like, are you crazy? But it's amazing, over 5 years, the middle schoolers, this has been the norm. I will say, over the last 1 to 2 years, there are a lot more watches, a lot more alternatives to the fully loaded smartphone, like Gab or Pinwheel, and there are a bunch of other alternatives that also look like a smartphone. So in terms of the not wanting to stand out or it being socially awkward, these devices look legit. So I agree that social isolation is not good for mental health. And at the same time, I think that we can be creative and work together to thread the needle where you can promote social connection without just handing over the smartphone. And that's been my experience, that people can really like walk that middle path. Yes, back there.
So I was always wondering, now, is all screen time equal, right? If we're using screen time for educational reasons, like all of our children in their elementary schools have this thing called a smartboard, is that affecting their brain's development just as much as gaming or social media or having a smartphone? Is all screen time equal?
It's an excellent question that I don't have the answer to. I wish. I think both the like message and the medium matter. I think that because we do know some of the harms of the screen use is both like the time that goes into it, essentially blocking out all these other nurturing experiences. So if they're in school and they're learning and presumably in sort of a class setting shoulder to shoulder with their pals and all looking at like a screen, as opposed to holed up in their bedroom by themselves and just sort of auto-scrolling. I think those are two different, and again, this is just me sort of more reflecting on the data that I know and also just thinking about brain development and pediatric development. And then, so that's like the medium. The message I also think matters in terms of what they're seeing. And this again is debated in the social media debate about mental health outcomes. But there can be like very stimulating, very disturbing, very upsetting content, especially with respect to the developing brain, and especially with respect to adolescents who many of you were here on Monday and got to hear Lisa DeMoore speak about this sort of sensitive period to norms in terms of being fed information about like what a thing is, like what something should look like, or concepts and ideas as the brain is forming are very malleable and subject to influence in this sort of critical window of brain development, which is why the broad recommendation is no social media until at least 14. In Jonathan Haidt's book, he says 16. That's not based on a paper. And so we don't have that answer, but I think that if the other experiences are preserved in terms of sleep and play and time with family and non-screen based experiences, I think that's much preferable to kind of what I'm talking about with respect to the smartphone. It's a great question though, and if we do have the paper, I will circulate it. In the back.
Thank you for that. You mentioned, so obviously there's like grassroots going on. You mentioned at the country level or the in city levels, we've been hearing phone-free schools and things. I'm just curious, like, what's the state of play in Massachusetts? You said it's sort of all over the place.
Yeah.
Are there school districts doing this?
Yes.
Are there like, what's, and is there like advocacy there?
Yes, so there's an advocacy group, I think I put it up here, Smartphone Free Schools, the movement. There's also a movement called Phone Free Childhood. There's Phone Free Childhood, I think international, and then there's one for the US. If you just look that up online, it's very clear, like you can sign onto their WhatsApp, and it's a very busy WhatsApp feed, but it's got a tremendous amount of resources. So the state of play in Massachusetts is that we do not have a state mandate. It's sort of being left up to individual districts. And also I think it varies school to school within a district. There are districts that have gone phone free bell to bell. For example, Newton Middle School. I think there are 2 or 3 middle schools in Newton. They are now using the Yonder pouches. There are a lot of independent schools that have just made it so and have paid for the Yonder pouches and are rolling it out. And then there are other districts like Wellesley where we're in a 9-session long working group for this year. And it's been an interesting discussion where everybody wants to take a really balanced approach and review the data. What's hard for me to sort of candidly is that I think a lot of the ideas about the benefits of these devices are lacking an understanding of the developmental model. This idea that like this is our world, it's a modern world, we may as well learn to live with it. They have to learn how to figure out how to sort of rein in their use, and I think that's just developmentally not possible. And so it's not a fair ask, and I also think it's not an appropriate sort of counter response to why this would be a good thing to do. But like, for example, California, New York, Ohio, I mean, there are many states that have passed legislature to be smartphone free bell to bell, and where it's being rolled out is, my understanding, is going very, very well.
And just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Is it mainly parents that are the blockers, or are there like constituents like teachers or
I think it's sort of all over the map. Like I think that people worry, and again, I'm just going to be super candid. People worry about a school crisis.
Sure.
And there are a lot of big feel appropriate, every parent's worst nightmare. And what I mean by that is a school shooting, and then the information about whether or not the device would actually improve outcomes there. If you do ask sort of our first responders, their counsel is no, that it would not improve outcomes. I think people worry about equity issues in terms of, for example, if you need a device for a continuous glucose monitor. However, you can get a medical exemption. I think also there's a lot of conflation of like this being an anti-tech or like a Luddite or kind of in the past sort of resistance, but the reality is like we can use ed tech like the smart boards or like check out the Chromebook or the iPad to do your research or look at this really cool video on YouTube that I just shared with you, but then put it away as opposed to having the tech follow you throughout the school day. So I hope that answered your question. Yes, in the back.
I was just going to say that it's coming. I mean, Los Angeles has banned it in January, so that's the second largest public school in the nation.
Yeah, the LA UPD. Yeah.
So it's on the way. I mean, I think it's going to spread.
I think it is going to spread as well. It's just sort of the rate of pickup.
Yeah, I'm more concerned. I mean, this is very concerning. But as a child and adolescent therapist, what they have access to, the amount of pornography of any type, probably worse violence. In this country, we freak out about sex, but people being maimed and killed, I mean, beheadings, they can see just about anything online. And there's been very few restrictions to that. And so the adolescents were coming, they couldn't believe the amount of violence they could see in sex.
Yeah. Hi.
Have you had the opportunity to present to a school with teachers and or kids or students? I know there's some pushback from teachers at our high school about this because they use the phones. I'd love to know how you can try to convince them otherwise, or if you have had success in convincing them otherwise and how so.
Yes, I've been privy to, it's been really awesome and like interesting to sort of see a process in action. I think, listen, it's a change, and so it's an org shift, which is complicated and annoying and expensive, but then you'll hear that like librarians say after 1 week, like, so I think if we could sort of gear up for like a difficult week or two, and really do lots of comms up front, do a lot of managing of expectations, and like, then just like hit go. The feedback I've gotten from schools is that it just goes really well. Like the kids protest, of course they do. This is something that they've come to rely on for entertainment, for making social plans, like really I have to email you now, like I can't just text you or call you kind of a thing. And then they just get on board because we're the grown-ups and we can set the precedent and say this is good for you, and it'll be hard or annoying for 2 weeks and then it'll be just fine.
Have you heard the teachers come back with saying we use the phones for tests, we need all instead of like phone books, and then the follow-up to that is not everybody can afford a Chromebook, etc. So
right.
Those are some of the things I've been hearing, at least in Winchester.
Yeah.
As far as pushback.
And I can imagine that that's a reality. Like I do think it will require some like rejiggering of how to administer tests. And it's interesting, like at our middle school back to school night, I did notice some of the teachers are for the first time offering like a pencil and paper alternative, which was just so, and that was just the teacher doing that. So I think people are like making changes and realizing that people learn differently and maybe there are some benefits to that. So I acknowledge that will be challenging, but I don't think insurmountable. And then I also think I would sort of reframe it as like, it's annoying to teach sort of a distracted audience. I mean, you all have been amazing. Everybody's basically stayed the whole time. That's so reinforcing as a lecturer. And, I hear stories from my daughter that like so-and-so has an ear pod in and she just wears her hair long. And like listening to whatever, maybe it's just music or maybe it's a movie. And that's just, I think that's a drag for the teachers. And then policing the devices. Certainly I've spoken to administrators who describe just like how much of their day is absorbed with phone-related mishigas, just like all the things. So that would just be solving a big problem. So I don't want to oversimplify, and at the same time, I don't think it's over-the-top complicated.
I agree with
Yeah, of course. Other questions? Yes, Ms. Stripes.
When you talk about prearranged play,
Yeah.
in terms of the data, do you think it's comparable if they're by themselves or with a sibling, or is it really that peer interaction?
That's a great question. I think it's all of the above. Like, I think it's all good stuff. And I think what used to happen is they got a lot of that at school too, and hopefully they still, like at the elementary level, get that at recess. And, after school, in neighborhoods, you don't necessarily see it as much, where kids just are hopping on bikes and then like bombing over to Sam's house and dropping your bike, and then now we're going to like old school pizza and getting a slice. But that is coming back, and certainly in our town. I think all of it is good. I don't think there's like one sort of way towards that. But the general gist of it is that they are free, and they are sort of determining what they're doing with their time and with whom. And it's outside in nature, ideally. Yeah, in the very back.
So I was wondering if anyone here has experienced pushback to their child where you have friends over and they're all on their phones.
Yeah.
And you say, remind them, well, aren't you here together?
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing to do. It is really hard to cut through that. Even if you have them in the same space, with the phones in their hands, there is no looking up.
Totally. And that's real. My daughter used to use a phone basket, not because she's like so cares about her own brain development, but because it was just so annoying and disappointing when she would invite friends over and then everybody's on their devices. So she would basically ask people to like chuck their phones in a basket, her friends. And recently I drove a big carpool of girls, and for a gymnastics event, and we stopped, and they did a phone stack in the middle of the table, which I thought was so cute, where I think they're getting the message, or they're missing the play. I think if we sort of offer the play, like, hey, we're going to stop and we can get some fun snacks, or here's like Uno, and here's Sushi Go, and different games, or here's a bunch of bracelet making materials, or arts and crafts. Like, the kids will venture that way. We do have to sort of make those things available. And then I do want to acknowledge that I think it is also hard and awkward and cringy, or you worry that you're like that family who nobody wants to come over. And we've been through all of that too. So I think it's the growing pains of all of this. It helps when you just set the precedent at a much younger age. This is just like not what we're doing. But leaning on one another for tips and tricks, I think, is really helpful and makes it feel less daunting and kind of icky as a parent. Yes?
I was just going to share, I think also, from so much of what I've read, the children are looking for someone else to set a rule or a guidance, because if the expectation is that they're just going to spontaneously on their own put away their phone, it's never going to happen.
Right.
They're children, their brains are not fully developed.
Right.
And so, when an adult says, hey, welcome to our house, this is our, this is our phone basket, drop it in.
Totally.
It's
They're
not,
like,
it's not
okay.
their friend who's saying, this is the rule.
Yes.
Saying, this is my parent. Or if the school is saying, there are no phones.
Yes.
Then there are so many testimonies of the students in those environments saying, I so appreciated that somebody else, the administrators, set a rule, and then we just all did it.
Yeah, exactly.
The expectation that the children are going to be able to fight that addiction and not pull it out every second.
Right.
And that's what we need to do as the adults.
That's right. I couldn't agree more. And they're so relieved when the grown-ups do their job. And I think we feel very ambivalent sometimes about doing that, and that we feel that they're going to be really disappointed, or they're going to be mad, or they're going to lose a friend. And this is all real. I'm really not trying to undermine that. And I think that the more you try that on as a parent, the more you realize it goes pretty okay. And then you get better at it. And even if it doesn't go well, that's another piece back to the whole space of learning how to either manage your own anxiety. It's hard to have your kid, it's very punishing to have your kid mad at you and disgruntled and saying you're ruining my life. And at the same time, you realize that's their developmentally sort of appropriate response, and then they come back. And so you can start small with sort of seeing how that feels, and then grow your repertoire, and it feels really good. Yes?
I just have, I guess, a comment and then a question. We, with our community and with your friends, moms and dads in particular, have instated a no phone carpool policy.
Awesome.
So, and across the board, it took about a week, and then the boys have really done a great job. And most of us have also asked our boys just to leave the phone at home.
Yeah.
They're going to get picked up, and all of this, and that also has been very helpful. So I encourage anybody else to try it. It's hard with girls. Yeah. But my question to you is, here in Winchester, the middle school has done a fantastic job of no backpacks. And at first, the kids are disgruntled because they're carrying their stuff, but there's a reason behind it, and therefore they're leaving their phones in the lockers. In the high school, which we're experiencing for the first time this year, that's not the case. There's certain teachers that have sacks in their classrooms, and the kids are required to put their phones away, but it's not a policy across the board. And I guess my question to anybody here is, how do we as parents step in to promote and advocate for this bell-to-bell phone-free policy? And is there anything else we could be doing, Doc, you know more, to begin that process to really...
We have great leaders here that didn't get introduced. Tina Call and Stephanie Gordon, who lead our HISC organization, Parent Education Council. And this was the reason we're doing this. This was brought up at the last HISC meeting in April last year.
Yeah, the second to last PISC meeting, Dr. Hackett attended, and Stephanie actually brought up the whole, can we ban phones in schools? And he said to us at PISC that...
Get the data. He said get the data.
Yeah, he said he will stand behind it if the parents are behind it to collect the data. So we did. I think he was here. Were you there? So Stephanie created a very brief survey that
That's in this packet tonight. You'll get a copy of this later.
Yeah. So Stephanie created this very brief survey that collected very powerful data. We shared it.
To elementary families.
Just to elementary, because we know that middle school and high school, totally different animal. We know that it's easier to implement at the elementary level, but we shared the data, and he told us to bring it to the school committee, right?
And we did.
And we did. And then the school
And it was
committee, then put it on the principals.
93% of the surveyed elementary age families supported a bell-to-bell device ban that includes watches, not just phones, the watches, it's the gaming devices, it's everything. I can't get 93% of people to agree that they like chocolate. That's a powerful number, right? So that was presented to the school committee.
So that's kind of where we are right now. We're working with Katie and Erica and Dot and Parent Fan, trying to get our community, I don't want to say educated, because we're all educated, but I think trying to understand the repercussions of smartphone usage, social media, virtual gaming, all that stuff, to just help parents understand how it affects our children, and then maybe it'll be an easier conversation with administration and to convince them to, can we please just get the phones out of schools, right? Because that's what we're starting right now. Like what Stephanie's talking about with the educational boards, that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, ed tech.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a sister issue.
Did this summer about basically ask, I wanted a lot of data, and then like, can we please have home-free schools? It was just a public comment, so they don't reply to you. And then I did ask Dr. Hackett at our last VO about high school, because like, okay, our kids are in elementary school now, but I want to know, like, is this in process? Like, are we thinking about this? And it wasn't a great response. But
He was open to a discussion.
But he was open to a discussion.
So I do think that if people are aligned on this issue, it's something that we can come together and present to the school board, to Dr. Hackett. So it's just sort of like some community organizing that we need to do. And we're happy to lead that effort.
Yeah.
So let us know if you want to get involved.
But in a way that feels like it's a partnership, not like no, we're the
It's all to the benefit of the kids and having a day without distractions.
And I would say teachers too. Like I think the whole school community would thrive in that setting. And I'll just highlight as a resource, the Phone Free Schools movement has I think it's like an administrator toolkit with like a step-by-step rollout. And it's just full of so much good information with like a lot of the science summarized. So that's the Phone Free Schools movement. The Smartphone Free Childhood has the Phone Free Schools movement has a Massachusetts chapter. So back to your question about what's the state of play in Massachusetts. A lot of people are trying to go see if there can be bills that can be passed and just go to the legislature, but I also think that's a very lengthy process, and so this is something that you can do locally. You in the back, you had a question.
Yeah, and I asked this question. I have 3 kids. My eldest is in elementary school, so I just want to understand, I hear, purely from a place of just for my information and because I want to learn, because my kids aren't yet there, right? Why is middle school and high school so different? Like, why is it so much harder? Because it seems to me that elementary school should be an easier task because of the age, right? But the real crux of the harm seems to be middle school, right? And then maybe the beginning of high school. And so, but all throughout high school, you want your kids engaged in the classroom, learning, paying attention, not on their phones, and so like, why is it so much harder? Like, it seems to be that much more important to be able to do it in middle school and high school, and so what's the resistance? Like, is it parents or is it something else?
In terms of the school piece, like
being phone free in school.
I
what
think
you do in your homes, right?
Right. So I think the resistances are often about parental. So I'm just going to list them off in no particular order, and all things that I've just absorbed along my travels. Parental anxiety, a parental desire to be able to be in touch with their child at any point in time. Concern about equity. Logistics, like pre and post school, if a kid has a job, for example, and their employer is communicating to them about a shift change, and if it's like unavailable throughout the school day, then that will put them at a disadvantage. There are people who feel that this is a developmental opportunity to learn how to coexist, that we're actually, it's sort of a backwards or more Luddite approach to just remove it. People feel very strongly about the word ban. They feel like that's really problematic. And I can understand that. And then also with respect to this issue, it's just about like put it away for the day. And then I think also logistics and sort of implementation and community organization, it's a change. And it's hard to do. And I think to your point earlier that I think administrators are kind of exhausted, and new initiatives are, not everybody agrees. So it's like sort of opening the floodgates to another struggle at a time when I think lots of initiatives are being rolled out. So I think it's really multivariable in terms of what the resistances are. And I'm really heartened by the data that for those who have either just had the state mandate or independent schools that have just pulled, just went for it, it's actually gone like really well, and the kids are totally on board, and everybody's ultimately happier for it.
I mean, you look at the piece of technology though, because like it feels like that your example, Gabby, right?
Yeah.
But it's like we already have examples of sunglasses.
Right.
With stuff
Right.
Right. And implantable tech is next, right? It's
Right.
very soon.
God.
You can't turn that off. You can't take it out of their brain or out of their heart or whatever. Like, how is this like? I'm not trying to be provocative. I'm just wondering, sort of like you take away the phones. If I just think something you can't take away, what have you done? Just spend the time for a little bit.
Right. So I think for those who couldn't hear, it's just sort of like what's next. Like the glasses are implantable tech, and how can we take those things away? I think, so that I don't get overwhelmed, I'm like, okay, one thing at a time. But I think it's also about a cultural shift where the kids then start to feel like this feels better, or there's something just like better about being at school, and now it's in my behavioral repertoire. Like I just don't use this device during the day. And I also think, again, starting younger, we can just sort of model like implantable tech. Okay, maybe like probably not going to be FDA approved in under 18, or we'll see. But like the glasses, you're just like, you don't send those to school kind of a thing. Like I think there will be cultural shifts that accompany this effort-filled sort of first step.
Can we do, everybody feels very strongly, can we do one more question just to be respectful of everybody's time?
Yes, totally.
And like, I have a couple wrap-up comments, but I'll wait.
Yes. Okay, in the back, you've been waiting.
I just wanted to ask, it sounds like everybody's here, which is awesome. I'm wondering, is this issue ripe yet, or might it be ripe to bring to the school committee? And if so, how do we present it to the school committee in the best way?
Yeah, so that's actually part of my wrap-up.
I'll let you take it.
I'm Jess Roach. I'm one of the co-presidents of Parent to Parent. We've been working with PISC, Katie, Erica, Dot. Thank you for helping organize this event and bringing Allie to town tonight. Thank you all for being here. It's like so encouraging to see people in a room. I know that many, like the coalition and also Parent to Parent, we've had a hard time filling a room post-pandemic. So like, it is good to see that parents are paying attention, that they're engaged, that they really care deeply about the inputs that we're giving to our kids and like parenting consciously and wanting to provide better, especially on a day like today. That's all I'll say about that. Some of our next steps that we have are we have, I think, the room until like 8, until 9. So stay and connect. Maybe you see a neighbor that you didn't know cared deeply about this issue. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and try to build up the community. Connect with other people, build and say like, this is important to me. This is what we're doing in our family. That way, people are starting conversations and they're having. It can be really awkward, and you kind of analogize it to a friend of mine. The first time was like, we had a dropout play date. She's like, by the way, you have no guns in your home. And the first time you ask that question, it's really uncomfortable, but it's something that communicates a priority and a benchmark, and this is what's important to our family. And starting those conversations, having those openers, shows people that you care, shows people that you want to commit to something different. So start with that. I think that we've had the discussions with the superintendent. We've started it sort of to no avail. So if everybody in this room tonight emails the superintendent and the school committee and says, I support this, we can provide language about we have emails already pre-programmed of this is some of the data. If you're not on the Let Kids Be Kids email list, I think the information's in the packet, so get a packet tonight. And stay updated through our email list. That way we can disseminate information more freely. But even an upswelling of support from parents and text your friends and say, hey, can you do this? It's really simple. I'm going to give you the text. Send an email to Dr. Hackett. Send an email to your principal. We've talked a lot about teachers and principals. Some of the I think we think that K-5, and I understand the standpoint of middle school and high school is really where the harm is. It seems like low-hanging fruit to start young, and then these kids will come up with a different expectation and norms and rules about what should be in a school and what should, when I started having this conversation, I'm just gonna flat out say this, a smartphone has access to everything, and thank you to the counselor who mentioned, somebody said in a meeting somewhere that in an elementary school during a recess, there's no unified policy about these devices right now. The principals have communicated goals and guidelines for what they want, but I heard feedback from a parent whose child was shown porn on the playground at a Winchester elementary school because another student had a cell phone. And the internet is out there. And I don't think anybody wants to have that conversation come home. And Johnny was just messing around on his phone on YouTube, and they don't have filter, there's no corporate filter that's keeping kids off of these on school property, or they're connected to Verizon or whatever it is. So that's not how you want to be having those conversations. So I think we start with K through 5. We feel like that's a really easy, we have almost 500 families that support it. And then we work towards, you don't stop. You work towards middle school, you work towards high school. Those kids know that this is just what's done. So email the school committee, talk to your principals, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, email Dr. Hackett, and express support of a different policy in Winchester. That way we can really affect change.
So tonight, we have videotaped it, if the Winchester, they're willing to do that. It will be playing on YouTube and on the Winchester station, and they will give me a link. And I'm going to take that flyer that you saw to bring here tonight and add the link to it. And then you can get your neighbors, friends, so we can expand it. This is a wonderful group. Congratulations. Who knew? I didn't have no idea who was going to walk in the door. But we can expand it. The raising aid information on parent, information on the coalition, and And we want to hear from you if you want more issues addressed in programming. I'm funded by the Cummings Foundation, so I'm very lucky for